Tonkotsu Ramen, it's got great base umami flavor. And it needs that time, love, and devotion to make something that's slow cooked, but yet so simple looking when it's finished. I can't wait to cook it. Here's how. Back again at Wok Wednesdays. I'm Jeremy Pang from School of Wok, Covent Garden, and here is this week's recipe. Now, I wouldn't usually want to dirty my board before having to get to the cutting of the vegetables, but I'm going to blanch the pork first. And in fact, I'll take this whole chunk of pork over here. I've got 2 different cuts of pork on the bone, or pork joints. And that's because I want a good amount of fat for this. So I've got a pork leg or hock with the big leg bone in there. And then I've got pork belly also on the bone. So that's got the ribs there. I'm actually going to slice the belly off the ribs, but we'll use the whole thing. Now that I've sliced that meat up, I'm going to roll this as much as possible. But I do also want to open it up a little so I can kind of put that into the middle of the roll. And that way, my skin of the pork belly can wrap all the way around. I've got some cooking twine here that I'm just gonna tie up nice and tight. So I'm gonna pop this all in to a big saucepan if there's space. So you wanna cover this with boiling water as much as you can, and then bring that to a boil. Once it's on the boil, let it go for a good 5 minutes and let it build up the scum, and I will press the parts of the pork or turn it around so that each part gets blanched well. So I'm going to take that out. I'll give it a quick sort of rinse under cold water just so that there's no sort of scum sitting on the skin of the pork or anything like that. Now we're going to start to build the base of the ramen stock. And I've got these massive onions here, and I want to use a lot of onion to give this stock as much flavor as possible. And I want enough onion to sit completely at the bottom of this pan. Now you could just put your raw onion in with some hot water or hot stock, garlic and other things in there as your base, but I quite like to soften the onions so that they add more flavor to the stock. And these will wilt down really well over time. I'm gonna take my garlic flavor, and you could just pop the whole bulb in there, to be honest. You want loads of flavor from that. But I'm just gonna break it up a little. So we're gonna keep the skin on, as long as it's nice and fresh. There's loads of flavor in that skin. So, whilst my onions are sweating, I've actually got our chicken stock, as I said, and I'm gonna bring that to a boil, and whilst I'm boiling the chicken stock, I may as well boil my eggs in the chicken stock. What came first, chicken or the egg? Both. Right, so my eggs, I'm gonna pop in on the rolling boil for about 7 minutes. And then you're gonna dunk them in cold water to cool down. So whilst the eggs are boiling, I'm just gonna set a few other things up. And I've got this miso sort of base, which we call a miso tare. And this is to put into the individual bowls of soup later on. I'm gonna mix that white miso with a couple of tablespoons of sake and a couple of tablespoons of mirin, which has got that slightly sweeter sort of rice alcohol base or rice liqueur. Just give that a good mix through so the miso melts well into that liquid. So that is for later. 7 minutes up into cold water. And if you need to, run the cold water tap over them to cool them even quicker. So with the onions, I quite like to brown them to a point where they're really nicely softened but have a good sort of almost starting to brown point. And then we're gonna place these guys in Jenga style. Pork Tetris, the guys say. I say Jenga, you say Tetris. And I'm gonna pour this stock over the top. So I've also got some shiitake mushrooms here, so I'm gonna see if I can fit those in somewhere. Chicken stock goes over to the top of that. And then you want that on a rolling boil, guys. And that is the difference between creating, I guess, more of a Western stock and a Tonkotsu ramen. Just keep it going at this rolling boil sort of tempo for as long as you possibly can. Now, I learned this hack recently from a good friend of mine, Nick. Hi, Nick. And apparently, if you put your egg with some cold water into a mug and then give it a shake around, that opens up the shell a bit so that when you peel it, it just comes off. Amazing. Thanks, Nick. Whilst we're on the egg tricks, I've got a bowl with a food bag wrapped around it for my egg marinade. I've got some Japanese soy sauce, the rest of that mirin and sake, some honey. Give that a good mix around. And then some spring onion. So what I'll do is I'll take the greens of the spring onion and finely chop that for garnish for later. And then the rest of the spring onion we'll just use to add flavour to the marinade. Eggs in, and then just tie that up so that they can sit there again for as long as possible. The longer they go, the darker the outside of the egg, or that white will be. Right, so my stock has been going for about 6 hours now. Eggs here. I'm gonna cut the end off there to get all that liquid out. And then my spring onions, I'm gonna pop into my hot wok there. Don't waste them. And whilst that's really hot, then I'm gonna pour this liquid into the wok. And remember there's honey in that marinade, so that's gonna come up to boil and start to caramelize a little. And I've got that whole chunk of pork belly in my ramen stock. And I just wanna use that liquid to give that pork belly even more color. So don't waste any of this meat, you know, that's all great stuff there. And you can see it's just falling off the bone and just really, really succulent. Same applies to the pork ribs. Don't waste any of that. In the meantime, this is starting to color the pork. I don't want it sort of over dark, but sauce is just all wrapping around that meat. Look at that. That honey is really starting to caramelize around the pork now. So those noodles, about 2 minutes on the boil, and then you can serve them up. Good spoons of my miso, and that will season my pork stock. I don't mind taking a couple of these lovely shiitake mushrooms, popping those into the actual bowl of noodles as well. So I'm gonna pour some stock into the bowl. So my noodles are gonna go in, just separate those noodles out again with some more stock. And then my eggs, and you can see even after just 5-6 hours that the egg's taken a lovely color. Your gnocchi mushrooms, so I've got gnocchi here just to blanch for about 10 to 20 seconds. That's all it really needs in the stock. My pork belly, look at that. That's a whole lot of love in a bowl. My Tonkotsu Ramen. So I've only waited 6 hours for this, but I'm pretty sure it'll be worth the wait. Here it goes, look at that. That's a beautiful spoon of ramen. Oh, wow. It's the type of dish you have to slurp. Make as much noise as you want, or as possible, and just keep digging in. Take as much time as you need, eat a second bowl if you can, enjoy every moment, as I've just done. I don't know why it's taken 4 years to make a Tonkotsu ramen for a Wok Wednesday. If there's any dish that you cook already at home that just takes hours and hours and hours, but is really worth the effort? Let us know in the comments below.